this story goes back to right at the beginning of the project. It was January last year. Dr. Horsley came out and he did a geophysical survey, magnetometry and ground penetrating radar. The ground penetrating radar, it found an anomaly not far from the side of the house, the side door. And this anomaly was actually quite deep. It looked to maybe be 2 meters deep, and it was roughly square. So 2 meters, about 13 feet, somewhere around there in depth. And roughly square or rectangular. It was definitely something different out there. And one of the clues we had was that on the 1798 federal tax returns, it talked about a dairy, which matched the approximate shape of this anomaly. Now, the dairies aren't where you milk the cows. The dairy would be where you would store the milk, store the cheese, that kind of thing. And we thought, well, that's interesting because the direct tax return also doesn't mention an ice house. So in January of this year, we got the orders to go ahead and start our test and see if we could find anything in this location. What was this anomaly? And what we found was complicated and perplexing somewhat, because what we found was that there was some kind of evidence for some kind of pit here, but that pit had been more recently filled with soil. By recently, I mean in the 20th century. But at the beginning of the 20th century, the end of the 18th century, it had been used to store trash. It had been to throw away your trash. So what we found was bottles like this. This is Lydia Pinkham's vegetable compound. There is these various bottles. Here we've got Chamberlain's colic and cholera remedy. And for those people who've been to Baltimore and know Bromo Seltzer Tower, this is a Bromo Seltzer bottle. So we have the inside of the pit is filled with things like this. But obviously, this isn't our period of significance, and we thought, well, had we stumbled onto just a big trash pit? Because you have to remember, there was no municipal trash collection at the turn of the century. We wanted to see, was this pit an ice house? Was it our period of significance? So my team, which was led by Zach Andrews, painstakingly removed all of these deposits and kind of got to the soil underneath. And what we found was that there was a pit. It had wood lining, and so the wood lining, what happened was the top parts of the wood lining had collapsed into the pit like this. So here's the interior of the pit, and it falls in like this, and then the soil starts to cover this, and trash goes in on top of that. So we thought, oh, well, this has probably ruined everything. But what we found was as the wood lining collapsed, it protected all the deposits which were at the bottom of the pit before it collapsed. So this was really helpful. And some of the wood floor was still preserved underneath, and the bottom half of the wood lining was preserved as well. But was it an ice house? Because most ice houses that survive tend to be brick lined, or they tend to be stone lined. So it's pretty unusual to have a wood-lined one survive this long. And a good example we know of another famous person who had one was George Washington. And he had 2 ice houses. The one you'll see at Mount Vernon is, I believe, his second ice house. The first ice house is believed to have failed, and so he wrote in 1784 to his friend Robert Morris, asking for tips and construction advice on how to make a new ice house. And so we know that he was using, he'd had trouble with this wood lining, but apparently the Hemsleys here at Cloverfield, they had more success. So I think this can show us a lot about how ice houses were used, and maybe also is very valuable in the fact that there aren't many that have survived like this. So we have some written records, but not a lot of physical kind of remains. So I think this is another area where Cloverfields has a lot to offer in regards to understanding life in the 18th century, life in Queen Anne's County in the 18th century. this is quite exciting. I say that about everything I find at Cloverfields, because it is. There's some fantastic archaeological resources here for future research as well. So I really think that this really adds to the Cloverfields story, and it adds to the value of Cloverfields just on a research basis.